around YouTube a little bit, so bear with me. But if you are online listening in, thank you very much for joining. Now I can see how many viewers we've got. 2 people watching, brilliant. I'm here this evening just to give you a bit of a tour of the camera, answer any questions you might have, show you some sample images, and I really, just get to know a few people. Hopefully, I had some great conversations at the photography show, which was just over. Feels like a long time ago now. It was nearly 2 weeks ago now, on the 17th of September, when we launched the Alfie on Kickstarter. So if you are one of our Kickstarter backers, thank you very much. We are 150% backed last time I looked, which is brilliant news. Allows me to increase some of the quantities of components that I'm ordering and get a bit more loyalty and build a proper relationship with my suppliers, rather than just ordering components in very small numbers. So I've got some cameras with me. I have got, let me see, hiding. Let's go for the ones with logos on. I've got a Alfie TYCH, which is the, say I've got an Alfie TYCH, which way around am I? Excuse me, let me change the viewfinder. I had a TYCH Plus with a TYCH viewfinder. Right, here we go. So this is the basic Alfie TYCH, complete with pinhole lens, zone sieve, and meniscus lens. And this is the viewfinder that you've got on top of there. And then I've also got with me an Alfie TYCH Plus, which has got the premium optics on the top here, and the premium optics. And this is just a prototype of the premium optics at the moment, on the 4th slot. So one of the things I would do at the photography show is really, I was meeting people who were digital photographers and analog photographers, a whole mix of different people. But it's not immediately apparent when you see this online how small it really is. So to give people a sense of scale and that you really can fit a 35mm film inside the camera, it's really nice to just see that in the back there. And we've got, that's the film gate. So our half frame film, it is exposed in that portrait format. And to load the film, you have to pull this knob upwards, which is your rewind knob, place your film into the back of the camera. Then, much like any other analog film camera that is not automatically loading, you have to thread the leader into this slot here. So I'll just turn it this way so I can actually do that. Okay, once you've got the leader in the right place, I then typically wind on just a little bit. And what I'm looking to make sure is that I've got my sprocket cog inside my sprocket holes here before I close up the back of the camera. Then I can tighten up this to close the camera back properly. That's nicely closed. Push down on this knob, so that's now engaged in the film. And then I will wind on a couple of frames just to make sure that I'm not exposing the previously exposed leader bit of the film. So to wind on, the wind on is not indexed, and that's so that you can do multiple exposures really easily. But to wind on, you have to look through this window here, and as you wind on, you'll see that the white marker comes up. There we go. So that's one frame. And I'll typically wind on 2 frames to be sure that I've pulled new unexposed film out of the canister. But that's now ready to shoot. So that's the kind of the manual bit, the bit that's very manually interactive on the camera. But then once you've done that film loading, you're now it's now up to you what way you want to shoot the camera. So let's talk you through the different features. So we've got our different lenses on the front, and you can change lens by simply rotating round to the next lens position, and it's the lens that's in the center of the camera that is the one that's selected. And I don't know if you can hear this, but there's a detent that indicates you're at the right space, and so you can both feel and if it's quiet you can hear that as well. So I'll put it on the f8 meniscus lens. Then you've got an on-off switch on the front. As you can see, I know the image is mirrored, but we've got the on-off switch there, and this is your shutter button. So once you turn the camera on, at the moment with our beta cameras you get a display that shows you. Now I'm hoping that we can get a bit of a better focus than that, but maybe not. So I've demonstrated this with other cameras. Frustratingly, we can't really get a good focus on that. Let's see if I can adjust my camera at all. No, I don't think so. So that is currently in the auto mode, and I can select which mode I'm in by pushing this button here. So I can push to select to go to a different mode. And then if I'm in, so I've put it in manual mode now. If I'm in manual mode, I can go up and down the shutter speeds by rolling this dial either left or right. And it's not continuously rolling. You just push it to one side and it will change the shutter speed and go up and down. I know you guys can't read the numbers there, but you can just about see the screen is changing. So we'll sort out a better camera for next time I do a live. Now, I quite like to shoot in the auto f8 mode when I'm out doing street photography. If I'm trying to do something where the lighting's a bit more tricky, maybe I've got a lot of shadow or bright sunlight, I will quite often switch to manual mode. The auto mode is great if the lighting conditions aren't super challenging, but if you get direct sunlight, much like any camera where the meter is not through the lens, direct sunlight on the metering window can spook it a bit. So you just have to be a little bit careful that in direct sunlight it's not doing something you don't want it to do. We've got an auto mode for each of the different lenses. So there's an f8 auto mode, there's an f56 auto mode for the zone sieve. That's currently, so I've just got another batch of prototype zone sieves in just this morning that I'm trying out. We're currently tweaking that. It's about f56, but we may adjust that number slightly, and we'll get the auto mode set accordingly for that zone sieve. And then we're on the TYCH basic, you've got a f125 pinhole, and on the TYCH premium you've got your the TYCH Plus, you've got your premium optics with your glass elements. So you would use the f8 mode for that, and then you've got an f125 and f56 auto mode for the others. Or you can just shoot in manual if you'd rather shoot manual and have complete control. Shutter speed wise, we can go up to 250th of a second, which is as much as I can get out of the shutter that I'm sourcing at the moment. And we can go down as slow as 30 seconds on a predetermined sort of user-controlled exposure, or there's bulb mode as well. And the bulb mode operates by one push opens the shutter, the second push closes the shutter. Now maybe I'm going to try this. I've not tried this before. So this is the view through the viewfinder. That kind of works. That's pretty cool. So that's the view through the premium optics viewfinder. The field of view through the standard viewfinder is very close, but the quality of the view is different. So it's a plastic viewfinder, so that optical clarity is not quite there. But it's the way that we decided, in order to get us down to a price point that people who maybe didn't want to go for the premium optics could then get a TYCH for a lower price point. So what else can we talk you through? So where are we with the prototypes at the moment? So as I said just now, we've got prototype zone sieves that we're testing out and trying to get the most out of the images that we can. I may, because there's a few different options on there, I may ask backers later this month which kind of images they prefer once I've got some samples in off the zone sieves that I'm happy with, because there's kind of different approaches to doing the zone sieve, and we're trying 3 different approaches at the moment. On the glass optics, we are looking at 2 slightly different designs with our optics designer Jason Lane in the US. So we've got a periscopic lens, which is where you have 2 meniscus lenses back to back with an aperture in the middle, and the second lens that's nearest the film corrects for the aberrations that a single meniscus lens tends to have. So that's one approach we're looking at, and the other approach we're looking at is a doublet lens, which is similar to the meniscus. You still have, technically it's 2 elements, but each element is made of 2 pieces of glass that are sandwiched together as a doublet. So you're still correcting for the aberrations in a similar way, but it's slightly better at correcting those aberrations. So if we can get the right price out of that doublet formation, that would be our preference to go for that. It's slightly improve the quality, but we're expecting it to be a significant improvement, and the simulations are showing a significant improvement over the meniscus lens. And it's really common when you're doing lens design, you will simulate and calculate effectively what the image is going to look like, and that's where you get your MTF charts from typically before you order your optics. And we're just we're looking to place our optics order this week. So that's where we are on the optics side of things. The electronics, and I've actually got some electronics boards over here. Let me just grab one. A couple of different ones here. So this is one of the electronics boards that's inside the top of the camera. This one has some extra wires hanging off it, and crucially it's got the display on it. So when I'm debugging and working on the boards and getting the prototype ones up and running, I will build these by hand. So they're hand soldered using solder paste and some magnifying glasses. So my success rate is gradually improving, but the expectation is I'm not going to be soldering them by hand for production. So for production, we will be manufacturing these with our supplier out in China. That's pretty much your only option on electronics at the moment if you don't want the risk of really long lead times. The semiconductor shortage has made things a bit challenging. So by going direct to the Chinese suppliers where most of the semiconductors have been manufactured in the first place, we are able to get our electronics manufactured for a reasonable price in a reasonable time frame. We've looked at UK manufacturers, and it's frustratingly expensive. And not only that, the availability of chips is really tricky. So there's a couple of the components that we can't get in the UK until mid next year. So that's the reason why we're going to China with that. We've got a couple of little bugs left to fix on the circuit, but we've got a fully functioning circuit at the moment. We've got a few tweaks we want to make to the light meter, and a little tweak that I would like to make to the driver circuit for the shutter, just to improve the way that it's operating and improve the efficiency of it to increase your battery life. So that's where we are on the electronics. The firmware that goes on the electronics, so that's kind of the software that runs the camera. It is going to be installed on the electronics at the factory. We're not planning on releasing firmware at a later date that users can upgrade. themselves, it would require additional circuitry that we haven't got room for in this camera, and also the additional complication of having to write the software to allow you to do firmware updates, which is not somewhere that as a company we're able to go just yet. Maybe something for the future. So the firmware that the camera comes with will be rigorously tested, and that will be the firmware that your camera will run with. If we do at some point do some major upgrade, there might be an option of a return to factory firmware update, but I'm not planning with the way that this camera operates on needing to do firmware updates. We want to get it right and release it rigorously tested. So that's why we're doing our beta testing program and getting people involved in helping us get that firmware just right. So that's where we are on firmware, and at the moment the firmware has got all of the main features are in there. The light meter's functioning. We've got some tweaks and adjustments, partly to the electronics, but also to the firmware to get that functioning a bit more accurately. We're slightly under reading in bright situations at the moment, but most of the time we're very good. The delay mode is now functioning. I've had some great feedback on Kickstarter on things to tweak on the delay mode, and so we'll be implementing those once I can get my head back into firmware and do a bit of software again. And then the hidden sort of feature that we haven't implemented on the firmware yet is the flash support. So we've got circuitry in this board here that can allow us to drive or trigger a flash through the USB-C connector, and that's not that we can trigger a typical strobe that might come from Nikon or Canon, but more that we can trigger our own proprietary flash. So if there is enough demand for the camera and enough demand for a flash, we can go there in the future. So that option will be in there in the firmware, but it'll only be realized if we have enough demand for the camera to build a flash unit. And that will, the design for that I've sketched up is one that will plug into that USB port and sit on the side here. I'm not sure exactly how high I can get the flash itself, but it should be reasonably distant from the lens itself to give you a decent flash separation and hopefully reduce the risk of red eye. So I'm going to open up for a few questions, because before I move on to any example images, whether anyone's got any questions related to the camera or what I do in the workshop here to develop things. I'm doing the live from here so that we can share a few things around the workshop if people are interested. And I've left my water just the other side, so bear with me 2 seconds. I'm just going to grab that. So if anyone has any questions, you should be able to type them into the chat. And my good friend and videographer, Chris, who helped me get the thing set up and also did the fantastic promo video for our Kickstarter launch, he's checked it's working. So please put any questions you might have into the chat here. And you do need to be a subscriber to be able to add questions. So if you're not seeing the chat or it's not letting you type in, you need to pop out to the YouTube channel and subscribe, and then it'll allow you to add questions into the chat. So while people are doing that, I put this on my bench because I wanted to share some of the things that inspired me. And this is an interesting vintage camera. I can't remember exactly how old it is. I think it's sort of 1930s era. And it's actually it's a French camera called a Lumiere LG, and it's got a lot of features that are really really neat and create a very small camera. It's got a cool pop-up viewfinder, which was part of my inspiration around the Kickstarter stretch goal, which I'll share in a moment. But it's also got some things that I decided I wouldn't incorporate because it adds to the engineering complexity of the camera, and I was concerned about making sure the camera was very robust and reliable. So this one, in order to use it, you have to extend the lens and rotate that round to lock it. So that's how you get this one ready to use. It has aperture and shutter control, whereas we just have shutter control on the Alfie TYCH and fixed aperture on each of our lenses. Winding on and frame counting is very similar. You know, we've got a winder on here at the top, and the frame counter is done on the paper on the back of the film. And this one actually shoots a larger format than the TYCH. So it's not half frame, it's square format. So take the height of a 35mm frame and have the same width as that. So I think you get 24 images to a film. I haven't shot with it yet because it needs a service, but it's very inspirational around the way that they've managed to cram so many cool little features into such a small package. So speaking of the viewfinder, some of you may have noticed if you follow on social media that we added a stretch goal to the project, and that's this cute little sport finder. This is kind of my first prototype of that sport finder, so there's a few little refinements to do, but essentially the idea was that if you wanted to be able to take your Alfie TYCH and shove it in your pocket without worrying about this extra viewfinder, which looks very cool but is a little bit of an extra height on there, then your sports finder would be able to flip down and make it an even smaller package. The other thing that it does is it gives you a different way to kind of frame up shots. And one of the benefits of a sport finder is that you get a lot of peripheral view. So when you're looking through the sports finder, it gives you an indication. It gives you where the center of the frame is going to be, and an indication of where the outside edge of the frame is going to be. But you can see the whole rest of everything you're looking at, which is fantastic because you can really predict when things are going to come into the field of view and time your shot right for your fast exposures. So we're quite excited to be able to offer that, assuming we get to our stretch goal, which we set at 54,000. Things are looking quite promising at the moment. We're, as I said, 150% funded, so we're well on the way. So if we manage to get to that stretch goal, we'll be able to add one of these into people's rewards as part of the package that you guys get. Right, I haven't had any questions come in, but then we're not a massive audience, so I'm going to share some photos. And this is something, when I was at the photography show, I had a load of images laid out so I could really engage with people and talk about the capabilities of the camera and show them how cool it is to create images with. So the first images I'm going to show are actually from a 10-image panorama, and I don't have prints of the rest of the 10 images. I only have them digitally at the moment, but gives you an idea. And this is, if you've got a half-frame camera that you played with before, this is a really fun thing to do, and a great thing to do with the TYCH. Is basically you can do a panorama with kind of like a window frame panorama. So this was taken at on the Isle of Wight, a place called Bembridge, the harbour at low tide. And there's, further round on the view, there's some, I think, going this direction, there's like an old boat that comes into view. It's a really, really great thing to play around with on the camera. And if you're struggling to use up a roll because you're desperate to see what the images are, and you're on 60 shots or what have you, then doing a panorama is a great way to get through the last bits of the roll. So just round the corner from me, from where I live in Farnborough, there's a really cool American car showroom. And this is a pair of images that I did as a diptych from that showroom. Some of you may have seen these online on social media, and these demonstrate the sharpness that is possible with that meniscus lens. It's really quite impressive, especially in the center of the frame, how much you can get out of that meniscus lens. So, people who are going for the TYCH and not the TYCH Plus reward, you can still get really great quality images with it. And those images support, going up to a reasonable size as well. It's somewhat dependent. There's another one from the car showroom as well, the American car place. Kind of depends what film you're using as well. So I think the color image here, I think, was on Kodak Gold, and this image here was on Kentmere 100. So both quite low ISO films, reasonably high resolution films. If you go for something a bit more atmospheric and grainy, and this is another cool technique that you can use on the TYCH. This is on it's on Kentmere 400, so it actually can't quite see from this webcam, but there's a bit of grain to this image. It was taken on a sort of intermittent cloud and bright day, and I did it as a double exposure where I literally exposed once, didn't wind on, flipped the camera up the other way and exposed again, and that was on Waterloo Bridge in London. So that's one of the other really fun things you can do with the TYCH, is do multiple exposures, and you don't have to think too hard about it. If you're using a color or a black and white film, then all you need to do is you can just shoot, and the latitude of the film, chances are you'll get away with it. But I tend to just reduce my exposure slightly. So if the meter or if I'm using the built-in meter and it's suggesting 125th of a second, I'll switch into manual mode and up it to 250th and flip the image. And you can do the maths to just do 2 exposures at half the speed, or twice the speed of the shutter. So you reduce your overall total exposure time is the same as what the meter is suggesting for 1 exposure. And now I'm trying to look for some images that demonstrate the pinhole. So this is cool. So this is one of my favorite pinhole images. I'm going to hold it a bit further back so it's in focus. So with the pinhole image, you end up with the center of the image is the sharpest area. It's not as sharp as your meniscus lens, and certainly not as sharp as your glass lens. But it's very atmospheric, and it very quickly, the focus goes soft around the edges, and you get this sort of bloom in the highlights that really creates an atmospheric look. And that's one of the things that pinhole photographers love. And I've got this is another pinhole image, but this is a multiple exposure pinhole image taken into direct sunlight from a moving train. And I decided to superimpose 2 images of the tracks, and you can see the sort of, I think the train was probably doing about 60 miles an hour at this time. So you can see the motion blur created. And that was just, I think we were talking about 2-second exposures for each of these 2 to create that image with the pinhole on the TYCH. If you want a direct comparison, I do have some direct comparisons, but I haven't exactly worked out which image was which from my notes. But this is a comparison between a pinhole image and a meniscus lens image, and the pinhole image is a lot softer focus. Doesn't have the sharpness and clarity that the meniscus lens gives. It kind of creates a nice look and feel. The samples from the zone sieve, I was hoping to share some today, but I'm not quite there yet. I'm not happy to share what we have at the moment. We're getting close, but I need to be happy that the look and feel of those images is something people will will be okay with before I start sharing those images, and I don't think we're quite there yet. But what else have we got? This is another one of my favorites. You may have seen this one on social media, and this is blown up to a standard 6x4 photo size from that half frame, and it's quite a, again, quite an atmospheric shot, but this is with the meniscus lens again. So let me just have a quick look through. So I shared this morning on social media some images that I got developed earlier this week, which were very kind of atmospheric and abstract as well. And I was really quite excited about the images. And that's one of the things I'm really enjoying about testing the camera, is actually getting out and taking images. And now I'm struggling to find them from when you've got a massive stack. So they were taken in Oxford, and they are of the kind of two. No, actually, I can't find them. No. I think I might have put them in. Here they are. Just getting myself a bit muddled up. Pressure at the moment. So there's a really cool crossing in Oxford, zebra crossing, and that's the zebra crossing on this corner. And it has they've sort of coloured it up with pride colours down either side of the zebra crossing, and it's created a really funky abstract. And the other one that I was really excited about was actually from the start of the roll. And what had happened is, and if you try and squeeze as much out of your film as possible, this sometimes happens with a half frame camera, is that you end up with this effect going on. So this is a bridge, a graffiti bridge, footbridge, and you can just, if you look at it as just one image, you can kind of get what's going on. You've got the footbridge going off into the distance. Here's a lamppost, and what's happened is that the very edge of the film, where it's all been exposed and the lab has stuck their sticker on before scanning, has created this furry edge that looks like the top of the bridge has got grass growing on it. But that combined with, there's actually a load of sort of scratches and almost chemical mistakes on this bit of film that gives it a really gritty look. So, good question, Connor. Thank you. Yay, first question. So using the Pinhole only in manual mode. I've been typically using it in manual mode for a lot of the shots. I've started using it in auto mode more recently. One of the challenges you've got when you go in auto mode is reciprocity of your film. So in order to give you a bit more flexibility, what happens when you expose film for a very long period of time, and typically above sort of 10 seconds, you can be in a situation where the response of the film is not linear, and you have to increase your exposure time to ensure that the film receives the correct exposure. I think, you know, a lot of the films cope with this up to kind of 30 seconds, which was why I set that maximum time on the manual mode, so that if you're in bold mode, you're kind of forced to think a bit more about what you're doing. So you can shoot in the manual mode. My advice would be on pinhole photography, if you're going to go in auto mode, is to stick with a film that can handle a bit of latitude and can cope with a bit of underexposure very well, if you want to just shoot in auto. Also, we have plus exposure compensation on the camera. This is something that I've got it working in firmware over the back here. I haven't put it in any of these cameras yet. And that allows you to adjust the exposure that the auto meter is going to either overexpose by up to 2 stops or underexpose by 2 stops. And the reason I wanted that in there as a feature was to really make it dead easy to do things like the multiple exposures, where you where if you were overlaying two images on each other, you would want to underexpose by a bit so that you don't completely blow out the film. And then likewise, when you're doing the pinhole, as per your question, and you're approaching much longer exposure times, you can add a bit of extra exposure to ensure that that film that you selected is getting enough light for your pinhole image. So that's hopefully that answers your question. It doesn't matter which lens you've selected. There is no interlock between the mode and the lens. So if you turn it to the pinhole lens, you have to manually select the f125 auto mode if you want to shoot auto, or the manual mode if you want to shoot manual. So that's a little watch out for you. If you just get into the habit, if you turn to select a new lens, change your mode to reflect the lens that you've chosen. The other thing that I find really good to get into the habit of, if you do not want to play with multiple exposures, is take your image and then wind on. And then that means that you just get into that pattern of winding on immediately after you've taken the image, and you know that the next time you go to take an image, you've already done that. I mean, you can go the other way and decide to wind on before taking an image, but it's a bit more prone, in my brain, that's a bit more prone to failures. I end up with more double exposures that way. So I kind of covered most of the things I wanted to cover, and I'm hoping that people have got something out of this live session. And I think let me just check my notes. Oh, USB charging, it's worth talking about that. So we've got a USB-C socket on the side. I'm just going to unplug my phone that's charging here with this USB lead and plug this one in so you can see. So when you're charging, a light comes on, a red light comes on to show that you're charging the camera. Once it's completed charging, that red light goes off. The meter, or sorry, the battery level indicator that's on the display is only active when the camera is on. So you can, I typically would charge it with the camera off, and that way it charges that little bit quicker. Charge time is about 2.5 hours. Kind of depends how far you depleted the battery. Battery life is dependent on the types of shots you're doing. So if you are doing short exposures, you're kind of 1/4 of a second, 250th of a second, that kind of thing, you will get multiple films out of one battery charge. If you're doing lots of very long exposures, then say most of your exposures are in the region of 30 seconds or above, then you may get to the end of the film and see that the battery's dropped a little bit and need to top it up. But you should easily get a film off one charge, even if you're doing long exposures. If you want to try crazy stuff and do hour-long exposures and things like that, my recommendation would be to just plug a separate power source in, and the camera will operate with the power, with the USB charge lead connected. So you can do that if you want to stick it outside and try and do sun trails, then or star trails, then you can. The other thing that's on my notes is about the filter thread. So where is it? We've got a 43mm filter thread on the front of the lens board. So I've got a red filter. I've also got a polarizing filter. I'll typically use the red filter if I'm doing black and white photography, especially if I'm doing landscapes, not so much if I'm taking pictures of people. It gives you a bit more contrast in your image, and it will make a blue cloudy sky a really dark and almost black sometimes on some films, with the clouds popping in white. So it's quite a nice trick. And the polarizing lens works the same as it would on any film camera. It will polarize the light and can help make foliage look more vivid or cut through a reflection on water. So they're kind of extra features you might be interested in that you can add to your accessories if you want to. We may try and find a good source for those 43mm filters and add them onto the website at some point after we've completed our Kickstarter rewards. But for the moment, you can just buy them typically on any sort of camera seller. They're not the most common filter thread size, but there's plenty of people supplying them. Then the camera is going to come with a lens cap, so you can keep your lenses free from dust, and with a strap as well. And we are looking for a partner to offer a soft pouch, so that the camera, so that you can add a case to the camera. If we start to do amazingly well, we may consider putting that in as a stretch goal, but we haven't found the right partner for that soft pouch just yet. And I did have a lot of questions sort of early on before a Kickstarter launch about battery replacement, and people being concerned about rechargeable battery and it dying and the camera then effectively being useless. So the design of the bottom of the housing is such that you can, with a bit of knowledge and a little bit of skill, and you need one small plus head or Phillips head screwdriver, you can remove this bottom plate and to get at the battery. So it is for someone, you know, with a little bit of confidence, it's pretty easy to change that battery. I would say that I'm not expecting the batteries to need changing on anywhere near the frequency that a mobile phone battery needs changing. When you think about the way a mobile phone's used, they're charged every day, and that's what you've got, a lifetime in your battery based on how often you charge it and how deeply you discharge it. And so the fact that, you know, unless you're going to shoot multiple films a day, you're not going to need to charge this every day. It means the battery, my expectations for battery life on this are in years in excess of mobile phone battery life. So, you know, typically your mobile phone, you might get 3 years out of it. I would not be surprised if this does between 6 and 10 years without any problem, and probably beyond, because all it's going to do is gradually lose a bit of its efficiency. But the fact it does multiple films means you should be good for years of use out of this. Okay. All right. I'm running out of things to say, which hopefully I have kept you interested and given you a bit of an insight into things. Is there anything anyone would like to see in the workshop? I can explain a bit about some of the machines we use, but I don't want to, you know, if people have kind of got what they were after out of the session, then I don't want to bore you. So what I'm planning to do once I end the stream is I am going to put, and given that we've had sort of up to 5 people on at once, I will add a new reward onto the website. I know we currently run out of the cheapest level to get in on the TYCH Plus camera, so I'm going to put a sort of YouTube special of a small number of at that cheapest reward level. So if you were keen to back and hadn't yet, there's an opportunity to get in at that cheapest reward level on the TYCH Plus. I think we still have just a few left of the cheapest reward level on the TYCH basic camera. So if you want to show your support and pledge and back us, that would be fantastic. It really helps us to turn this into a long-term sustainable business and give us a way to invest in the new developments for the camera. But I will sign off here and say thank you very much for joining. And please, if you found it interesting, useful, and you think other people would benefit and enjoy me doing it again, let me know, and I'll I'll schedule another one sort of before the end of the Kickstarter to give people another chance to learn about the camera. Thanks, Alexander. Lovely. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and speak again soon.